Hi, mine's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, as far-right leader Geert Wilders collapses the Dutch government because his party's been killed in the polls, I'd like to take a look at the 5 factors which led to his failure in government and see if there are any lessons for Nigel Farage and Reform UK, but also those of us trying to work out how Reform UK might approach the next election. But first, for daily news and politics, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So yes, I escaped from London. I survived the last couple of days, which is more than can be said for the Dutch government. Yesterday, far-right leader Wilders announced he was pulling his PVV party out of the coalition, collapsing the government and meaning that there will now have to be new elections. The government only lasted a little bit longer than it took the 4 coalition parties to negotiate terms. But why did he do it? Because his party has spent about a year experiencing an absolute tailspin in the polls, from being way ahead of their nearest rival a year ago to drop into roughly the same level as 2 other parties now. And they don't think things are going to get any better. So Wilders acted to save what seats he could still win above his unshakable core support. And although I'll go over the details in a moment, the reason essentially is because the PVV was seen to have failed in government. Looks like Wilders thinks he can more easily win public approval from the opposition than from power. He's literally running away from power. Which is why I want to link this to Reform UK, because it's still not absolutely clear that Farage wants power. I am starting to lean into the belief that he might do. But there are others who are actually closer to his operation who have said they don't think he does. And Farage, of course, is able to leverage plenty of money by being the anti-establishment voice. Way harder to do that in power because you are the establishment. It's not impossible, but it is harder. Trump is managing it a little bit, Wilders not so much. So what are the specific ways in which the PVV were seen to fail, and would any of them resonate with Farage should he win power? Well, you could put it down to 5 issues. Compromising on policies does not go down well with uncompromising extremists. Being part of a coalition which was often at odds with one another made the government look unstable and reflected badly on the PVV as the major party. Failed to deliver on core promises, welfare cuts and being a bit cool on NATO. Being the anti-establishment voice which became the establishment. So would any of these be a problem for Farage in power? Well, let's go through them. In terms of compromising policies, now obviously Farage wouldn't have to work with like a 4-party coalition. There aren't 3 other parties who would work with him. However, even if Reform UK won an outright majority, there would still be compromises with their policies. Why? Because many of their policies, particularly their big ones on immigration and the cost of living, are impossible. And I don't just mean illegal. I mean physically impossible. For example, some of Reform UK's anti-immigration policies wouldn't just fall foul of the courts. You may say, well, they'll just attack the courts like Trump did and ignore them anyway, and then we have a constitutional crisis. No. Some of their policies assume certain behaviour on the part of other countries which would not happen. For example, their idea of just picking up asylum seekers and taking them to France. Well, France is hardly like to say, oh, fair enough, we'll sort them out for you. And imagine if by the time we have our next election, Le Pen's national rally captures the French presidency, even if not by Le Pen personally. I mean, they're going to be actively helping refugees get to Britain just to get them off French soil. There's a similar level of impossibility about Farage's cost of living policies. They would actually melt the pound, triggering hyperinflation, all-out revolution if he carried on with them. Farage knows this. In fact, although I keep saying that I'm leaning towards believing that Farage does want power, and part of what's done that for me is the fact that he's flipped from supporting electoral reform to first past the post. But his obviously impossible policies tell me maybe he doesn't expect to win next time. However, if he did, then he would certainly be toning down his platform policies. I think what Nigel Farage wants, again, there's multiple possibilities. I suspect what he wants is he wants a large share of the seats in Parliament, but on the opposition benches. I think that's his ideal. Now, in terms of conflicts with coalition partners, you might think Farage would at least be safe from this. If he has to form a coalition with the Tories, they'd probably be the junior partner and also relatively tame. They've already sort of become Reform UK light anyway. However, even if Reform won an outright majority, Farage would still have to deal with internal conflicts. The sort of candidates which Reform are attracting are not the politically aware or deferential types. After all, Farage is a grifter, right? It means he knows the difference between truth and fiction. But many of his candidates, just like his supporters, they believe the warped version of the world that he presented to them. So they are likely to object, and loudly, if Farage suddenly changes his approach in government. They will expect immigration to be all but eliminated overnight. Like, well, why don't we just stop the visas? What's wrong with you? For people to see improvements in their cost of living straight away, they'll be saying, well, you said you would do this. Why don't we just put a budget out next month? After all, Farage is peddling easy answers. So his own MPs aren't suddenly going to be accepting that those easy answers aren't so easy after all. You'd only managed to hold out for so long by blaming the woke civil service blob. You couldn't trade on that for more than a year or so. Labour weren't even given a year to show improvements before the public turned. Will Reform UK, the champion of easy answers, really get longer? No, and their own MPs will not stay quiet for long. They will think they're sweeping to power and put everything to rights really quickly, like they think Trump has. Then there's the third one, failing to deliver major promises. That's definitely a danger. Farage is promising net zero immigration and an easing of the cost of living. You can't do both of those. You'll probably not do either. But if he delivers net zero immigration, then okay, yeah, the NHS and many important organisations will collapse. Worse NHS outcomes, more hostile jobs market. Labour are already hampering economic growth with their own immigration policies. And they've not even said that there should be a cap on immigration, much less reducing net migration to zero. That's because it's simply insane to do it. Same with his tax cutting plans. Not only are they worth more to the rich, but even the benefits to the poor wouldn't transpire because he's got no way of making the cost savings without crushing public services in the very areas where his vote will be strongest. Some of the areas he's winning. You destroy public services in those areas, you lose those votes. Of the five, this is the most obvious area where Farage would fail and be seen to fail. He would, of course, blame the establishment, as he always does, but when you're Prime Minister, you have the power, so your excuses don't last long. Wilders had the ability to blame coalition partners, and he wasn't the Prime Minister. That didn't save him in the polls. Farage would have nobody to blame. In terms of welfare cuts and NATO issues, Farage does run the same risks as PVV. He's already talking about cutting welfare spending at the council level in the areas Reform UK won power in last month. He is also a Russian asset and frequently talks down NATO. And it's not like the British public are more in favour of welfare cuts or cooler on NATO than the Dutch. So this is a vulnerable area for Farage as well. Finally, the risk of suddenly becoming the establishment you've spent your life attacking. PVV won support by complaining that the government is shit. Obviously, it's what any opposition does. This became a more difficult line to use once they were the senior partner in government. Reform UK will also find the same political gravity bringing them down. Yes, like I said, they'll blame the civil service like all governments do when they're struggling. That won't cut much ice for long. This is what happens when an anti-establishment populist party, peddling easy answers, is told by the public, all right, you take over and show us how it's done then. PVV have decided that it's actually better in opposition than power. Trump is also suffering unpopularity, but his plan is to dismantle democracy so he never needs care what the public think again. Polls, what are they? I'll just turn them upside down and say I'm doing brilliantly. Farage won't have Trump's power to dismantle democracy, but he will have more powers than Wilders did in his country. So what do you think? Will Reform UK think that they are more like MAGA or PVV? Will Farage think he has a way of dealing with it? Or will he not care, just spend a few years making himself rich and then leave office? Or, as some think, will he have no intention of winning power, just getting rich by breaking the system from the outside? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.